Brian McDonald is from Roy Hill and also the program, the chair of our steering committee, and Adrien Guiraud is from CSIRO and is also the program leader from the research side on iron and steel. So please welcome to the front. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Gus. That was going to be my introduction to briefly tell you about myself, but yeah, that's it. Look, Brian McDonald, representing Roy Hill. If you're not from the iron ore industry, Roy Hill's quite a large iron ore mine, I think the largest privately owned iron ore mine in Western Australia, and I'm very pleased to be here. But you didn't come here to listen to me, so I will invite our first speaker up. The theme for this morning is International Best Practice in Pathways to Net Zero Iron and Steel, and I feel a bit like we've been climbing a mountain, clawing up the mountain of knowledge the last 2 days, and I hope this afternoon we're going to reach the summit after some enlightening insights from the international sector on top of the great wealth of knowledge we've learned over the last few days. If only we could all retain that in our heads, I'm sure the solutions would become clear. But let me invite up to the stage Professor Hiroshi Nogami from Tohoku University, and a reminder, all the bios are online, so please have a read about his very impressive background. At the end of this, please come up. We've got quite a long session this morning with the coffee break, and we'll have a panel discussion after that, so start thinking about your questions. The questions you need to ask for all this to come together at the end of the day. But round of applause, please.
So, good morning, everyone. So, I'm Hiroshi Nogami at Tohoku University from Japan. It's a great honor for me to be here. So, first of all, I'd like to display the acknowledgements. So, because I often forget to display this one. So, because I've run out of time. So, anyway, you see that? Okay, start. Okay, the first, so I'd like to show you the Japanese status now. This is annual crude steel production. Till the year 2000, the world steel production was about 800 million tons and stable. But after year 2000, the Chinese production grew rapidly. So now it's about 1.9 billion tons it was produced in year 2023. And China now produce about 1 billion tons. The next, India, 140 million tons. Then Japan, 87 million tons. Japan is the third largest production steel producing country. Okay, so this slide shows global carbon dioxide emission by country. So Japan is the fifth largest carbon dioxide emitting country, and it emits about 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Among this 1 billion tons of carbon dioxide, about 34% is from the manufacturing industry. So among this 34%, about 40% is from steelmaking industry. So as a result, the 13% of the global Japanese emission was from steel industry. So this means, the carbon neutrality in the steelmaking industry is requisite to realize the Japanese carbon neutrality. So on May 24th, 2007, the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe gave a speech of Cool Earth 50, at the Future of Asia Symposium. And he invited all attending country to halve the carbon dioxide emission from the level at that time. So then, October 26th of 2020, former Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga declared Japan pursue the carbon neutrality by 2050. So next year, So the Japanese government changed the NDC from minus 26% to minus 46%. So after this governmental work activity, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Japan, so it is called METI, so they established a 2 trillion yen fund to provide continuous support the research and development project, demonstration and social implementation project that commit to the ambitious goals. This fund is so-called Green Innovation Fund. And METI also set 14 priority sectors, so that contribute not only to achieve the carbon neutrality, but also the developing the Japanese, contribute to the Japanese economical development. The 14 sectors are listed in this slide. The steelmaking project is in the carbon recycling and materials sector. Okay. Under this Green Innovation Fund, GRAINS project has started. So GRAINS stands for Green Innovation in Steelmaking. This project is run by Hydrogen Steelmaking Consortium, so that Nippon Steel, JFE Steel, Cobelco, and JRCM attended. So this project runs 4 tracks. So, okay. The first track is a cost 50 and super cost 50. So in this track, the hydrogen is utilized in the blast furnace. So in the cost 50, the hydrogen generated in the steelwork is utilized. And their aim is 30% of carbon dioxide emission. So it is combined with the CCS. And the super cost 50 use external hydrogen to extend the reduction of carbon dioxide emission further. Next track is a carbon recycling blast furnace. So in this track, hydrogen is not injected into the blast furnace directly, but it is utilized in the carbon recycling path. So in this carbon recycling path, the carbon dioxide in the blast furnace top layers is converted to the methane by the methanation reaction. So hydrogen is utilized for this methanation reaction. This methane is sent back to the blast furnace and to decrease the coke usage. The third track is a direct hydrogen reduction technology. So in this track, the hydrogen reduction shaft furnace is developing. So, but this shaft furnace is already developed in the European countries in advance. So, but in this track, the aim of this track is producing the high-grade steel product from low-grade raw materials. And the fourth track is development of electric arc furnace technology. So this aims to realize very weak EAF. So anyway, so in the GRAINS project, so these 4 tracks are ongoing. Okay, from this point, so I will introduce the other projects in Japan to decrease the carbon dioxide emission in the ironmaking area. The first, so this is IEA's forecast of the process route of crude steel production. So this figure, this forecast is for the world and the regions, and the process share at 2019 and 2050 is listed. What I want to see is a red framed part. This red framed part means BF-BOF route. So that means even 2050, certain portion of the steel product is produced through BF-BOF route. Okay. So this slide shows the Japanese carbon dioxide emission reduction pathway. The yellow and green line is the pathway consistent to the 2 degrees C limit and 1.5 degrees C limit, respectively. And the black dot on the left, right on here. So this is the Japanese previous NDC. So it is clear that the previous NDC is insufficient for the carbon neutrality. Okay. Then this orange dot, orange mark, is a new NDC of Japan. So I think that so it is derived from the linear reduction toward the 2050. So it seems sufficient for the 2-degree limit, but insufficient for 1.5 degrees C limit. Okay, to realize the carbon neutrality in time and achieve the global warming limit of 1.5 degrees C, so we must start up hydrogen reduction processes as early as possible. So, but when can we start to use the cheap and sufficient hydrogen? So additionally, it is expected that the blast furnace iron making will continue with certain extent and period. So this means that the blast furnace process must reduce its carbon dioxide emission, and such new technologies are necessary. So this is a chronological table of the research and development project in iron making area in Japan. So this yellow colored part is the hydrogen utilization part. So and it includes the Cost 50 and Green Innovation Fund. So I already showed that in the previous part of this presentation. Okay, next. This yellow part is the utilization of composite material of the carbonaceous material in iron ore. This slide shows the effect of distance between carbon and iron oxide on reaction time for the reduction of iron oxide. Centimeter order and millimeter order of the distance is in the actual blast furnace. So usually the reduction of iron oxide takes a few hours in the blast furnace. And if we can decrease the distance to the micrometer or the nanometer order, the reaction proceeds very rapidly, then it's finished in a few minutes. Okay. At the end of the last century, our project, very long name, is our research project on innovative smelting reaction in blast furnace aiming at halving energy consumption and minimizing environmental load was started. And this project was called EC project, and it was the first national project in the iron making area of Japan. And the fruit of this project, in the carbon composite iron ore material, the reaction of iron oxide and the carbon dissolution reaction accelerate each other through coupling effect. And this project come up with the use of this reaction to control the temperature inside the blast furnace due to its rapid reaction and enzymic reaction heat. So from this idea, the ferrocoke project ran 7 years. It's parallel to the Cost 50 project. So in this project, the ferro coke, so it is a formed coke, so including the metallic iron particle. So was the technology for that material was developed. And in the pilot plant was built, and 300 tons of ferro coke was produced every day, and the blast furnace charging test was carried out in the actual blast furnace. And they confirmed the 10% of energy consumption and carbon dioxide emission. Okay, so this yellow colored part at the bottom is a CCU stream. Okay, sorry. In 1990s, very early CCU project had started in Japan by Professor Yagi. So this is a methanol synthesis process flow. In this process flow, the natural gas is reformed to syngas and sent to the catalytic reactor. And the blast furnace top gas, its component is same as the syngas, but the composition is different. So if we can combine the methanol synthesis process and the blast furnace process like this, the blast furnace work as a reformer for the methanol synthesis. So in this process, the catalyst suitable for the blast furnace top gas was developed, and some feasibility study was carried out. So additionally, the conversion of the methanol to the dimethyl ether, shift the equilibrium state to produce the more methanol. And the catalyst for dimethyl ether production was also developed. Okay, next project is the IACRES project. The Professor Kato at Tokyo Institute of Technology, so they changed the name of the university to the Tokyo Institute of Science, distance. So anyway, the ACRES stands for Active Carbon Recycling Energy System. So this system is applied to the ironmaking. That's IACRES. In this system, the carbon dioxide emitted from the blast furnace is reduced to carbon monoxide or solid carbon by using the zero carbon energy, electricity. And for his project, Professor Kato is developing metal-supported electrolysis cell. Electrolysis cell is usually formed on the ceramics, but it is difficult to make it bigger. So it is a metal-supported one. It's suitable for scale-up. The next one is CRIP-D. So it is proposed by Professor Murakami at Tohoku University. So his idea is when the composite material of biomass carbon and iron oxide is heated in a special condition, irregular swelling occurs. This swollen pellet has a porosity higher than 90%. So this can use as a catalyst for the carbon deposition or the reverse water-gas shift reaction. And if we deposit the carbon, so on this material, the carbon deposits not only the surface, but also inside the pellet. And he proposed such a process. The production of porous iron, gas reforming, reverse water-gas shift reaction, and carbon deposition are performed only on the single grate. And this carbon deposit iron is sent to some iron making process. So to produce the pig iron, so if we get the pig iron, so we can utilize current refining process after LD converter. So And the carbon is removed from in the reforming process and sent back to the gas reforming and carbon recycle in this process. The final project I show you is the Sekisui process. Sekisui chemical company has a technology of chemical looping. So in this technology, oxygen deficient metal oxide used as a catalyst. And they use two columns, two or more columns. And in one column, the reduction of carbon dioxide occurred. In the other column, the oxidation of hydrogen occurred. So, and the gas switch each other. So that results in the reverse water-gas shift reaction. So in the ordinary catalytic reaction of reverse water-gas shift reaction, the carbon monoxide yield is usually about 50%. But in this process, carbon monoxide yield reached more than 90%. That's their good point. And this technology is utilized to convert carbon dioxide to the carbon monoxide like this. And this carbon monoxide is sent back to the blast furnace. And some part of produced carbon monoxide is used as a raw material of the chemical industry. So Sekisui is developing this project with ArcelorMittal. Okay, so this is all of the project I introduced you. So anyway, get back to this chronological table. We are on this orange line, 23rd of October 2024. So you can see the blue banner on the top. Okay, so this is the last slide, but very important for me. From 12th to 15th, next month, so we will hold the Q2 Symposium in Nara. Nara is the ancient capital of Japan, before Kyoto. So anyway, the Q2 stands for the second symposium of carbon ultimate utilization technology for the global environment. The world trend heading to the carbon neutrality usually means hydrogen utilization. But from my talk, now you may understand the importance of the carbon ultimate utilization. So if you are interested, please access q2.com. That's all. Thanks for your kind attention.
Wow, thank you very much, Professor Nogami. It's really impressive the amount of research that's been done over many decades. You get a sense kind of awe of what they've been able to achieve. And in Japan, they certainly love the blast furnace. They're very famous for blast furnace research. And again, everyone in the iron steel industry would know this, but if you're not, famously they froze an entire blast furnace and then dissected it to understand what was going on inside. Incredible stuff. So thank you again. Right, our next speaker is from Sweden, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but does anyone remember the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, that TV show? Yep. And not spoiler alert, but at the end of the show they said, what's the answer to life, the universe and everything? It was the number 7. I wonder if the answer to everything in the iron and steel space is actually Swerim. But to find out, please welcome Paul Cobden, Senior Researcher from Swerim.
Hello everyone, thanks for the opportunity to come and speak today. This is the High Temp Forum, so I'm going to talk about CO2 capture and using two different processes that both work at relatively high temperature, so 400, 600 and 900 degrees C. So that's why I feel I can come and talk to you today. Swerim you might know by its old name, Mayfos. We are a host to industrial pilot facilities. So we hosted an experimental blast furnace. We have a 10-ton AC electric arc furnace, 7-ton converter, a DC furnace, And we do all kinds of very high TRL demonstrations of activities for our steel partners. But today I want to talk about 5 European projects that we've done in the CO2 capture space and utilization space, starting in 2015 and still carrying on today. And this represents round about 90 million euros investment from the European government in CO2 capture processes for the iron and steel industry. And of course, you can't do that alone. You have to have a lot of steel partners and a lot of other partners as well. One thing you might notice is that some of the partners, SSAB, why would SSAB be in there? You can also see Stegra is also a partner. Why would Stegra be in there if they're going for hydrogen-based steelmaking? It's because hydrogen-based steelmaking is not carbon-free steelmaking. But let's take a step back. If we look at traditional iron and steel making today, coal, coke, iron, steel, hot rolled coil, dilute CO2, some co-products. What you can, of course, if you've got renewable energy, you can decide, okay, I'll throw all that away, make hydrogen, reduce the iron ore, send it to an electric arc furnace, or if you've got a lower quality ore, maybe ESF and BOF again, and essentially no carbon. But that's not really the case. It's not a no carbon case. And you can also think about, okay, what about implementing CCS? Also a possibility, and it's just the cost differential between the two when you decide if you can get rid of your CO2 into a pipeline. Of course, that's also a large added investment, but it's not the same order of magnitude as investing in hydrogen. It's very geographically dependent. And of course, if you've got a lot of renewable energy, you can try and think about where to implement that. So, unfortunately, on the bottom line, it's not actually a no CO2 scenario. Why do we know that? Because we already make a lot of iron steel with, or steel from scrap. And DRI, and we know these are not carbon-free processes. So there's actually some CO2. So in any case, we'll still need some kind of carbon management and thinking about that. But then, what it actually, and if we've got hydrogen, okay, maybe we can do some utilization. But then it comes down to, okay, so how do we think about this? Well, first, have we got renewable energy? When and where are we going to use it? Second, if we can't use it directly in the process, can we make hydrogen and use that in the process? If we can't do that, or even if we can do that, when and where to capture the CO2 in the process? Many of these schemes have multiple units, all with different CO2 footprints. And then when and where to utilize. If you really can't get rid of the CO2 into the ground, you have to think about where the CO2 is going to go. And then the only question that really remains is your gas oxidative or is it reductive? And that chooses the type of technologies you can work on. So we've got 2 pilots, around about 1,000 normal cubic meters of gas per hour at Swerim, one for reducing gases with all the traditional steel makers, also including the new steel makers. One which we're building at the moment based on calcium looping. There's a pilot plant already in Oviedo for the waste incineration CO2 capture, but we're building one specifically for the iron and steel industry together with Sumitomo Foster Wheeler. On the left-hand side, we've got a process that works at 400 degrees C. On the right-hand side, we've got a process that works at 600 to 900 degrees C. So, and in terms of materials, the materials we use on the left-hand side are based on magnesium. The materials we use on the right-hand side are based on calcium. But let's get into reducing gases. So basically, basic oxygen furnace and BOF gases. In order to show what you can do in terms of CO2, you have to build up infrastructure. So a pipeline, 600-metre pipeline, bringing in blast furnace gas from SSAB site to our experimental facilities, up to 2,000 normal cubic metres an hour. You need water gas shift if you want to do anything in the reducing space. You need capture columns, 10-metre column. You need CO2 buffering because any kind of downstream process using gas needs to have a constant feed of gas. It becomes very difficult if you haven't got constant feed of gas. You need electrolyzers for balance of plant. You need nitrogen-hydrogen separation. All of these pieces of equipment have been at Swerim for demonstrating use of CCS and CCUS. Now, the one technology here, this is more or less the only graph I'm going to show. Let's see if I can point. This is CO2 purity versus the carbon capture rate. The light blue box is what we promised the EU. The darker blue box is actually the operational points that we wanted to achieve. And of course, getting up to 100% capture and 95% purity is a nice first step. The reason that we've got all of these space is because we have to explore how the technology works under all the different conditions that you can imagine to try and optimize the technology to reduce the energy footprint. This is working round about 1,200 normal cubic meters of gas per hour. So, having done that, having demonstrated that new technology working at 400 degrees C for CO2 capture, we thought, well, what can we do? How can we integrate this into utilization? Here's a ship that runs from Gothenburg to Kiel. It's already running on methanol. And this is the container of methanol that we made in northern Sweden for this southern Sweden ship. So this ship ran for at least a seventh of its journey on the 20 tons of methanol that we made. But in terms of the whole flow sheet, it's not that complicated. It will look complicated to people from the steel industry, but it's not that complicated if you're going to make methanol anyway. Another thing that we looked at is not if we've got this CO2 problem, can we export it as a product, for example, methanol, but how can we improve the use of the gases, the energy of the gases internally in the process? And so we also looked at, for example, reheating ovens, reheating furnaces. This is the 3 ton per hour walking beam furnace. And we did post-combustion capture of CO2 coming from the reheating furnace. Now, reheating furnace is typically only 2 to 3% of the total footprint of a steelworks, but it's still one of the stacks that a lot of CO2 comes out of. And so it's still one of the places you have to understand what your options are in terms of decarbonisation. But we also went the other way. We also looked at pre-combustion. So we took blast furnace gas, we completely decarbonised it into a nitrogen-hydrogen mixture, and we actually used it for reheating of steel samples. And if you ask the steel industry, you know, how important is this? How important is the technology you're using? Well, actually, the really important thing is not the capture technology involved, it's this. It's what does it do to the product? How do you changing your gas compositions, the way you're bringing heat into your furnace, how does it affect your product? Because your product is not what you're selling. It's not methanol. It's not something else. It's steel, and you want to have the best value of steel that you can make. And so that's the important thing. It's not the capture technology, unfortunately. There's lots of capture technology to choose from. We've chosen 2 which have very nice integration options with the steel processes because they work at higher temperatures. Finally, this is a project that we're still building. This is also a capture and utilisation project. This is to make ammonia from BOF gas. That's the same BOF you'll need downstream an ESF. Typically, then you're talking about, industrially, you're talking about 50 to 150,000 tonne per year plant for ammonia. And there's a really nice integration that you can do with the steel industry. Once again, it looks like a complicated flow sheet. This is not complicated if you're used to making ammonia. Of course, we're building the unit as we speak. So now I'd like to go on to oxidizing gases. Oxidizing gases, what am I talking about? For example, the electric arc furnace, but also reheating ovens, hot stoves, etc. There's lots of CO2 sources at a typical steel plant. I think in Dunkirk, there's 31 stacks with different qualities of CO2 coming out of them. So you really have to think about how can I do CO2 capture in such an environment. And some of them are oxidized, well, they're all oxidized in the end, but some of them are reducing halfway through the process. But what's the problem with electric arc furnace? And I think this was highlighted a bit yesterday in the talks in the afternoon. There's actually quite a lot of carbon that goes into a typical electric arc furnace today. There's basically fresh iron because you want to make sure that your alloys don't overwhelm the steel properties that you want. You've got the alloying elements themselves, all of them containing carbon, because otherwise they don't actually go very well into your melts. You've got coatings and plastics associated with scrap metal. PCI is something you do a lot. Natural gas, improving productivity. Anthracite for things like foaming, protecting the refractory, and you've got the electrodes. Now, all of these are very relatively small amounts of carbon, but they're still significant when you add them all together. And some of them won't be relevant when you go to hydrogen-based DRI. For example, you won't have coatings of plastic, unless, of course, you want to hedge your bets and be able to use scrap in your electric arc furnace as well as hydrogen-based DRI. So, what we've found is that really in terms of choosing your CO2 capture technology, the really important thing is the characterization of the gas. This is measurements we did at Alima, so on their AOD off gas. And really we can describe the gas with 5 Ds. It's dusty. It's the most dusty. It's discontinuous. It's on and off all the time. It's dilute. By the end of the process, it can be down to 2 or 3%. It's dirty. It's got all kinds of stuff in it you don't want. H2S, SO2, phosphorus, all the stuff you really don't want. And it's dynamic. So it's not even though it's turning on and off, the composition is changing all of the time. And so the CO2 capture technology you choose has to be able to deal with this type of variability. And if you just look at choosing the right type of technology, so here's a graph that shows a range of different CO2 capture utilities and the dust load. Electric arc furnace is really very dusty, and so you need a technology that addresses that. So this is just, of those 5 Ds, just focusing on dust just for a minute. So what does that, why is dust important? The number one CO2 capture technology in the world today is amines, solvents. Look at what happens when you go from a relatively clean gas to another relatively clean gas. And we're not even in the area of the amount of dust that you have in an electric arc furnace, and you have a lot. This is the number of cycles that the amine will go through before it decomposes. And this is the important thing when you're thinking about what kind of technology you want to use. So, on oxidative capture, as I said before, this is a project together with Sumitomo Foster Wheeler, and we're building a CO2 capture unit using the calcium looping principle. The reason that we think this technology fits very well with the electric arc furnace and decarbonisation of the electric arc furnace is because we can build in a buffer of hot material in the process. We can define a carbonator which is oversized, which will pick up all the variability in the gas flow rate that you get from the electric arc furnace, with a buffer of materials in the process at high temperature, and that's the real innovation we're showing here. We can feed continuously to a calciner and make a continuous feed of CO2. You might say, but can't you just use a gas holder? Gas holders are very much known within the iron and steel industry. The electric arc furnace steel industry does not want a gas holder. For whatever reason, they don't want it, because, I don't know, they see how the other iron and steel makers deal with gas holders. They just don't want it, so they need a different solution, and this is one of the solutions. I think another very nice part about this is that when you think about electric arc furnace and using biocoal, you have to use a very high quality material to be put into the electric arc furnace itself. If you're using a calcination process, you're very much, the options you have are much broader in terms of what you can choose and the quality of the material going in for doing your decarbonisation. So, just as a final thing, I'd just like to say that we're just about to kick off another 18 million euro project where we're going to take electric arc furnace from or CO2 from what I call the really hard to abate industries. Iron and steel, it's not that hard to abate, it's just a question of cost and getting the right technology in place. What's really hard to abate, that's submerged arc furnace. So we're working together with Farion Alloys, who are a ferrochrome producer, for CO2 capture, using calcium looping, and also with Celsa Group on the electric arc furnace for CO2 capture. Because we're talking a lot these days about the decarbonisation of the 70% of steel industry we have today, which is based on BOF or BF-BOF. But that's not, even if we implement that, we've still got all the steel makers that are using electric arc furnaces that need to decarbonise as well. It's not that they have to it's not that they can sit still. They still have to be able to decarbonise their processes. And part of that is coming from biomass input, and part of it will come from utilisation. So that's all I had for today.
Thank you, Paul. Look, I think, we've been talking a lot about how to switch from the current ironmaking and steelmaking processes to, and the role that DRI and hydrogen-based DRI will play. It's good to see that even that's a very important discussion. CCS doesn't need or shouldn't be overlooked, and it still has a very, very important role to play in the future of net zero or low carbon steelmaking. So thanks again, Paul, for highlighting that. Next up, we have Parizat Pandey, who's the director for the DRI product group at Metso, coming all the way from Germany to talk to us about Cicored and how that flexible DRI process can use also ionols for green steel making. So please help me welcoming Parizat to the stage.
right, first thing first, I need to figure out how does it work, but eventually we'll figure out. So my name is Parizat Pandey. Thank you very much for the kind words. I'm coming from Germany, but actually an Indian, residing in Germany since 9 years now, and now as a recent role, I've taken over for the commercialization of a very old process called Cicored, and we will talk about the new avatar of Cicored. How does it look today? What are the possible combination of this process with various downstream facilities? And how are we looking at ourselves as a phase, or this process looks at itself as a phase of net zero scenario versus what are the steps we can take also for meaningful transition towards the net zero situation. So this actually, the background of this slide that you see is actually the plant that was built by Lurgi in 1990s. And this is actually the only plant which has till now run on 100% hydrogen as a reducing gas. And the plant was built actually to target the iron ore coming from Brazil. It was a fines-based process. It was reduced in hydrogen, 100% hydrogen atmosphere. The HBI that you see in the foreground was used by electric arc furnaces in US. So what is this process actually? This process is fines-based reduction process with equipments used from fluidized bed reactors. It's a proven direct reduction process where the product is actually zero carbon HBI or fines DRI. Since we are talking about fines and directly reducing it with hydrogen, there is no step requirement of agglomeration. So what this process can eventually do is take a unit operation out of the iron making route. So today I'm not going to talk about the nitty-gritties of the process itself. On the right side that you see is actually the 3D model that we built around the plant concept of Trinidad with its new engineered solutions. I'm going to talk today about what are the various combinations of this process and reduction units with actually suited or actually required to be suited for the iron ore which is available. So the basic idea that we had was how can we now engineer something that we have already and which has proven itself, and how does we make this relevant to the available iron ore base we have without being need to do upstream beneficiation and something like that. So there are basically three possibilities we are looking at the right now. One is the two-step reduction process, which is applicable for very high-grade material, which produces you highly metallized DRI and HBI. The second step is only one stage of reduction, which we call pre-reducer, and this is applicable for low-grade ores, mainly very, very good application for Australian ores or Pilbara ores, and you can club it together within downstream electric smelting furnaces. The third step, which we call it as a transient step, is more meaningful for the areas where the blast furnaces are still young. Lots of investment has gone into those production cycles, and we don't expect that it will be taken off overnight. That's the two-stage Cicored process. Very simplified flow sheet. It's a combination of two types of CFB reactors. The first one that you see is a CFB or circulating fluidized bed reactor which has a massive uniform temperature distribution because of its genesis, or you countercurrent feed the iron ore and the hydrogen, and because of intensive mixing that happens within, you have a high possibility of high heat and mass transfer between iron and the gaseous reduction phases. The second operation or the equipment that you see is fluidized bed or bubbling fluidized bed, which has a very relatively low gas velocities, and that provides you an excellent properties for higher retention time. Now the combination of these two is actually looked after because the iron ore reduction with hydrogen is very fast initially, and the reduction kinetics actually slows down, and you need to have a combination of possibility to capture those kind of reduction kinetics. And that's why these two equipments was used. As you can see, the fresh hydrogen is countercurrent to the feed of iron ore, and this provides you, or the fresh hydrogen being injected into the second phase of the reactor gives you more driving forces for the reduction to complete. Looking at the time, I specifically go to the second one. I think you can see this, yeah. So this is a combination of Cicored process or reduction process with only one stage of CFB with a downstream electric smelting furnace. And pictorially, we have represented here the 6-in-line rectangular furnace, which is our own company's product. And this is very relevant today into the scenario where we are and where we are trying and talking about decarbonizing Pilbara fines and Pilbara various grades of material. So this is a solution we have for low-grade iron ores. It has only one stage of reduction, or we believe that's more, from complexity point of view, that's much easier to have one stage of reduction. The target here would be that the reduction with hydrogen takes care of around 80 to 85% of metallization. The balance of reduction, gang separation, and purity happens in the electric smelting furnaces. Possibility of electrification is tremendous. So you can electrify the whole smelter, you can electrify the whole process of the Cicored. And addition of carbon, which is actually still needed for BOF operation, etc., can be done in the electric smelting furnace. The third variant that I'm talking about is more relevant for a transition phase, where eventually, and rightfully so, we will never see that all the blast furnaces are shut off overnight. And how do we make ourselves relevant for that? So the basic idea here is actually to take the green or HBI or green DRI and substitute the oxide-based burden or blast furnace burden with metallic-based burdens. So we think, and this is a concept right now, as you see on the right side on the black flow diagram, it's the conventional process route, and we are saying that if you have iron ore fines and a hydrogen source, we can semi-metallize it, and either you can inject the fines through the 2 years of the blast furnace, which has happened and is happening actually also for refractory maintenance, or you can loosely briquette it and feed it as a charge on the burden. Depending on what your source of hydrogen is and how green the flow sheet can be made, you have a potential in the transition phase to save from 0.2 tons of carbon dioxide to 0.6 tons of carbon dioxide, which makes lots of meaning for the transition phase to be relevant. I only have now 1 minute, but let's quickly go to the other one. Yeah. So what is the core promise of the process? It's a simple benchmark that we did in-house on what's our conventional CO2 emissions. These figures are talked about day in, day out, and we all know that blast furnace, though very suitable, very relevant, is the most polluting conventional process that we can think about. Our core promise remains with Cicored that if you have as much as green possibility in your utility sector, our product out of this can be zero carbon. And once you put it into EAF, which requires certain carbon to be added for melting, the least possible emission can be around 0.2 tons of carbon dioxide per ton of steel. What we have done so far, we have done extensive amount of test works in our research center in Frankfurt and research center in Pori, which is basically related to smelting. We have tested so far and adapted this flow sheet or this process concept for goethite ore, hematitic ore, very dense magnetic ores, titanium-rich iron sands, titanomagnetites, ilmenitites, high sulfur material, low sulfur material, pellet fines material with special treatment, etc. So all we are saying is that Cicored has proven itself into hydrogen atmosphere and has produced HBI or DRI with hydrogen reduction of iron ore fines, and is extremely flexible in terms of composition of your metallics requirement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Parizat. Yeah, look, it's great to see an example of technology really starting to look at the complexity or the Australian ores, the context of Australian ores with low-grade processing and providing a pathway and a solution so that Australian ores keep their relevance in a decarbonized world. And yeah, especially that pathway towards producing a low metallization feedstock for blast furnaces is a really interesting one. Next up, we'll be welcoming Dr. Joe Herbertson, the co-founder of the Crucible Group company. He will be discussing the topic of renewable carbon products for the transition to net zero iron making. Welcome, Joe.
Where do you point this? Where do you point it here?
Oh, no, you can keep it here.
Okay. Today I'm going to talk about renewable carbon products. We're talking about decarbonising the industry. We're not talking about removing the carbon element. No matter what we do in terms of shifting the load to hydrogen, there's going to be quite a lot of work for the carbon atom. And by and large, one of the ways we're going to deal with that is renewable carbon. And that can't, for long, be an afterthought. This is actually a sophisticated business that's going to have to emerge. And we're going to have to take a integrated systems approach to that business. It's never going to work unless it's driven in a business way by value and use to the iron maker. If it's value and use to the iron maker, there have to be tailored products. I can think of about 15 different ways to get renewable carbon into the iron making world, and hardly any of them would be the same product. They need different densities, different strength, volatilities, reactivities, fluxing, and so on and so forth. So we're talking about tailored carbon products. We're not just saying, oh, make some biochar and throw it somewhere. The biomass is quite different from coal. It needs to be a distributed manufacturing system because it's a distributed resource. There needs to be a capacity to be out and about and collecting it in much smaller lumps than we do with coal. So we need carbon making equipment and facilities that suit the kind of environment we're in. And at the bottom of it all is sustainable biomass supply. It's going to be contested. Quite rightly, it's going to be contested for fibre, for relaxation, for spiritual renewal, whatever. There's a lot of reasons that people will want biomass, and if we can't have sustainable and in most cases regenerative processes of delivering biomass to make the carbon, we won't have a renewable carbons business. So that is the total anchor, and that is our relationship with nature at the end of the day. So today, in that, I'm just going to pick a very targeted, specific example. It's not meant to be the only one or whatever, and that is the use of cold bonding carbon or composite agglomerates, and around the proposition that there are some substantial emission reductions to be made through supplying self-reducing composite agglomerates to the top of blast furnaces. And I'll address the carbon supply side. Another day for biomass supply, that's my actual passion, but today we'll talk about the products. First, just coal bonding. In my mind, it's definitely going to have to happen. Agglomeration is by high temperature processes, overwhelmingly by sintering in actual fact. Sintering represents, depending on what your raw materials represents about 10% of the emissions of the iron-making system. That is very substantial. So the more we decarbonise, the more that sintering bit's going to look bigger and bigger and bigger in terms of what's left over. And there's no doubt in my mind that on a safe climate trajectory, sintering will be largely phased out. I can't see a world of a safe climate trajectory by 2050 where we've still got a lot of cinder plants around the place. So I'm assuming cinder plants are going to be phased out. Now, I think it's going to happen partly because I've been watching, and we all have, Vale in Brazil, and it's not technical clever. It's not like there's some scientists in Brazil and they've been doing some really clever work on coal bonding. What really strikes you is that Vale is using this as a business lever for leadership. It's building, it's positioning itself around the green briquettes, around the scope 3 reductions, around anthracite removal, around Technored and so on. It's presenting a very comprehensive offering to the steel industry, and the green briquettes are not just a technical thing. They're leveraging that in enormously, intelligent business sense, and it's on the way. So you can read. For my purpose today, the main thing about cold bonding is that gives you the possibility of leaving some carbon in the ore. If you put it in the ore and then send it to the sinter plant, it'll oxidise, it'll be fuel. But if you want, as you move to cold bonding, it gives you an option to put carbon in the suitcase, if you like, and offer up the blast furnace carbon-containing agglomerate. So the first thing I want to say is that if you put a carbon-containing agglomerate in the blast furnace, it will go in the ferrous layer. If it goes in the ferrous layer, it will be working up the top of the furnace where, traditionally using coke to do those early pre-reduction things, at a time when you didn't need the coke strength. You need the coke strength at the bottom of the furnace. So you can actually take some of the load off the coke at the top. And it's probably got a potential of about 50 kilograms of coke replacement in the top of the furnace. The constraint is not how much carbon you can put in the agglomerate. The constraint is how much coke you need left as lump coke to act as a distributor of the gas at the bottom. So probably take out 50 kilograms of coke, and it will often be nut coke that you take out by doing this. And that makes it, it's not that we're making a nut coke product, we're taking the nut coke roll function out of the top of the furnace. So if you're not, a lot of people put nut coke in the ferrous layer and they get about 50 kilogram saving. So that's the scale of it. Now, if you put your carbon in renewable carbon in the coke, its effect on emissions in replacing fossil carbon's the same whether you inject it or not. But the steelmaker pays 2.5 times more for the coke. So the value of use to the ironmaker, to the steelmaker, is at least double than putting it in the tuyeres. And I'm not saying don't put it in the tuyeres, but it's much more economically viable, if you can, to put the carbon in the top of the furnace where it's fulfilling the function of removing coke. That's the highest value. Now, because there's a limit of about 50, or you run out of coke for the bottom of the furnace, because there's a limit to this in the blast furnace, it only corresponds to about 3% carbon in the ferrous burden. So you could just trickle it in 3%. But of course, when we say that you get a 10% reduction in emissions through sintering, you can get another 7% reduction by putting carbon with it. Well, that's if you do everything. If you replace, you have to phase out all of the sintering to get your 10% benefit. And then if you dribble in about 3% of carbon all the way, you get your 7% the carbon. But it's not the agglomerate that's limited. So what I'm posing here is a very interesting idea that's very important in terms of accelerating decarbonisation. Once you've got to about 12% of the sinter being phased out, which is not so scary, you can load up to self-reducing levels of 20% or so of carbon and get your 7% up early rather than late. So I think this is a very interesting opportunity to bring forward emission reduction. I really like the idea of 20% self-reducing briquettes rather than 3% for everything, because 3% for everything is not really that interesting. Once you get up to higher levels, the same with the ferrocoke that we heard earlier and so on, there are interesting things happen around the metallurgical performance, and you get very, very, interesting improvements in productivity up in those processes. So if you look at the Technored or something like that, that goes in with a very tight composite at the top, the volumetric productivity is very high. So I think if we go in that direction, we're laying the foundations for the future as well as reducing now. In a local environment, the only blast furnace we're going to have in the country by 2030 is the one in Port Kembla. They're going to reline number 6. They've got economic life in that thing for decades. That makes them the magnet for renewable carbon. Once you've got if your blast furnace is what you've committed to for a while, for some decades, most of the reductions come from different inputs. That doesn't come from changing, you haven't got the choice of putting in a direct reduction plant or something. So that makes them very, very dependent on and have a high appetite for the things that can reduce inputs, and they state that. They, pre-reduced agglomerates, carbon-containing agglomerates, and char in the tuyeres and so on. So they've actually indicated that they've got an appetite for over 500,000 tonne of renewable carbon into that blast furnace. So it's hard to imagine any other factory in Australia that would have a bigger requirement for solid renewable carbon. But in the work that they've done, the sobering conclusion is there's no established biomass biochar supply chain in Australia. So the point I'm trying to make here is the critical step that we've really got to accelerate is laying the foundations of sustainable biomass and effective char making technology to enable the others. And so that's now my last slide is that a modest contribution from where I come from. We've taken to the commercialisation stage, to the point of commercialisation, our continuous biomass converter, and it is very well suited. There's no established business here, so it's not like pointing to someone else or they're better and so on. But we think we're very well positioned from point number one, because you produce a consistent, highly carbonised material. That's where you need to start. And then you get other benefits around co-products that make you money and so on. There's some great flexibilities around secondary biomass. But importantly for the biomass supply comes the fact that it can be structured modularly. So it's for people in casting, you don't build bigger and bigger strands, you build more and more strands. You don't say, I want double the production, I'll have twice as big a bloom, I'll just have twice as many billet casters. So the way this is going to be configured is in multi-stranding, so that if you go into a place where there's a particular potential for carbons, 30,000 tonne a year of biomass or 50,000 or 10 or whatever, you can tailor the number of carbonising strands to that and so on. And more importantly, biomass is out there. That's, the great thing about biomass is out there, and the worst thing about biomass is out there, right? So you even in Brazil, where they are the masters of this, we deal with talking to ArcelorMittal and people like that. Even when there's a large amount of concentration of biomass production, it's still done in production hubs. Otherwise, the forestry trucks are in a traffic jam and so on and so forth. So the supply system into one of the plants in Brazil, it starts at 100,000 hectares of biomass supply system, and then it concentrates, and there's 5 regions, and there's hubs within the region, and so on and so forth. So one of the great things about the way our process works is it can be self-sufficient in energy, in terms of the electricity and the heat that you need for material to be sized, to be dried, and so on, because you'll often not be very close to established infrastructure. So there's an idea on the table that's only a week or two old, which is, I throw into this environment, that this plant on the right is ready to go, but it's in a steel plant which is now closed, so it's in the wrong place. It wasn't in the wrong place when we built it, but it's in the wrong place now, so we're just considering where to put it. And circumstantially, in the last few weeks, the idea has emerged that maybe that can be done under the auspices of the hilt, where there would be a lot of variable interest in having some biomass processing and carbon making potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Really interesting to hear about biochar opportunities to use in the iron-making process, and various of them, and the nature of the biochar will really influence where it can be used. Last speaker for this morning session, Dr. Shabnam Sabah, a postdoc research engineer at the Swinburne University of Technology, and she will give us an overview of the work she's been doing through the HILT CRC on flash reduction by hydrogen. Welcome.
Which way it moves? Hi everyone, thank you for the introduction, and I hope that I will keep pace with the time and everything. So I'll be talking about the flash reduction by hydrogen. So I'm Dr. Shabnam Sabah from Swinburne. I have been working in hydrogen DRI process modeling, and then currently I'm working in fluidized bed and also electric smelter. Quite exciting, and hopefully I will save all the problems of iron making and steel making by at the end. So today we'll be talking about the Calyx project we did. It's finished in March, and I'll be talking about the findings of it. And just to share you that I am this person speaking, but there are lots of team members that they have worked in this project to make it successful. So our research partners were Calyx, Swinburne, and then University of Adelaide. And then we also have industry partners from FMG, Liberty, then we have Grange, and also, what was the name? I forgot. Apologies for that. Okay, let me move on to the next slide. How do you move on to the, oh, yeah. Okay, so flash reduction by hydrogen. So this is the zesty technology that Matt introduced yesterday. So it's a novel hydrogen direct reduction process. It's based on the Calyx CFC technology. And it's basically, the concept is simple. We put hydrogen ore from the top by gravity feed, and you flush the hydrogen from the bottom. And then it's a counter current flow pattern. And particle size can be, we have been playing around with the particle size. At the moment, it's less than 500 micrometer. We are aware that this kind of process is also similar to the process that was developed in early 2000 by Professor Son and his co-workers at University of Utah. But there are some differences with the project, with the process, with the zesty process. Now, so this is a part of the Hill CRC project, RP1009, and it was a pilot test campaign. It was carried out at Calyx, and the reactor tube was heated between 900 to 1050. Hydrogen stoichiometry ratio was played around between 1.2 to 2, and they have used 100% hydrogen for the reduction. Now, this is an overview of the project. Because of the time constraint, I will not go into all the details of the project, but I'll be focusing on only the pilot test, the findings from the pilot test data. So what was carried out was in Calyx pilot test. So there was 84 rounds were carried out, 7 different ore. So there was goethite hematite and also magnetite ore. And the characterization part was carried out at Swinburne. Some of the things we carried out externally, the metallization test and chemical analysis. And then there was some experiments with briquetting, and so it was a preliminary briquetting and melting experiment with a 0% carbon DRI, and we found that briquetting 0% carbon DRI is quite challenging, so there are lots of challenges involved. So we are still working in this area. And there was a reactor modeling of the zesty. So that's probably it's already been, will be published soon. So we are in the review process at the moment. And there was a preliminary technoeconomics of zesty that was also carried out as a part of the process. So this is the process flow of the whole thing, how hydrogen ore was processed. So it was dried first, and then it went through the pre-crushing, and then it went to the zesty reactor. The samples were collected, and some of the samples were sent to external providers and also to Swinburne for characterization and other things. For the metallization test, we did it with ICP-AES test, and that was carried out in an external company. So these are the findings from the goethite hematite ore, and this is a summary of all the things has been done. So it shows that highest level of metallization we got is above 95%, so which is quite promising. And then when we look at the different factors that affect metallization, so the first thing we investigate is the hydrogen reduction ratio. So it shows that the hydrogen reduction ratio, when it's increased, it affects the metallization positively because you have more thermodynamic drive, and that makes the metallization higher. So this is irrespective of different ore, it is all throughout, hydrogen reduction ratio played an important role in increasing the metallization level. And then there's an effect of temperature. This one is a bit weak, and it varies from ore to ore. Sometimes we saw that we found in some ore the effect of temperature was quite good. Some of them is not so, but there is a general trend that temperature helps with higher metallization level. And this is the particularly interesting one. This is the particle size. So we have found that the significant effect we have in the terms of metallization is the particle size. And so that means for zesty, particle size is a thing that we could optimize. And when for comparison purpose, I took out only the particle size D80, and we saw that it has a significant level of metallization. So as you can see in the graph to the right-hand side, when the particle size and metallization level is plotted, it shows that when the particle size is less than 200 micrometer, we got the highest level of metallization. I should also mention that this is at the pilot stage at the moment. When we are scaling up, these things might change, and so we will look into that as it goes along. And then we have this is the firelight. So when we investigate the DRI that produced in the zesty, consistently for all goethite, hematite ore, we found formation of firelight. And so we wanted to quantify this firelight amount and see if there is a connection with the metallization level. Now, I should mention this is a semi-quantitative XRD, so these numbers are really not concrete, but as it shows that when we put it in metallization level and firelight, when the percentage of firelight increases, there is a level or decrease in the level of metallization. So we wanted to investigate, because this is for the pilot test, we wanted to investigate and really quantify how much the firelight affects the metallization. Does it affect significantly? And is there any sort of minimization we could do? So these are still out there, and we are starting a new project with Hill CRC to investigate this, and I'll be leading this project. So the XRD results showed consistent firelight, and when we look at the SEM, so we found a firelight, sometimes it is interpressed into the iron, and sometimes it is separate particle, but we found firelight all throughout in these particles. And this is the story of magnetite. So I will say that the story of magnetite isn't complete yet for us. Zesty hasn't been optimized for magnetite yet. So the highest one we got from the pilot test is 71% for the pre-oxidized magnetite. So we played around with 2 magnetite, and then there's a 1 pre-oxidized one we got, and the maximum level we got is 71%. The factors that affected the level of metallization is the high temperature and also the pre-oxidation. Now, if you look at the SEM image to the left side, so there is a picture of the original magnetite ore, which is very dense, less porosity. So it's quite different than the goethite, hematite ore, where we see much porosity, so the level of metallization is higher. When we pre-oxidize it, you can see lots of crack formation, which helps with the higher metallization level. Conclusion. So this has been a quite interesting project because we could really do the work in pilot stage and see the results. So there was 84 runs has been carried out. There was lots of SEM and XRD. Swinburne has been quite busy. Research team has been quite busy with that. And then the goethite hematite, we found that metallization above 95%, which is quite promising. High temperature and also the high reduction, hydrogen reduction ratio helps. And there's a general trend in the level of decrease in metallization level when the firelight, when there is an increase in the firelight formation. In the magnetite, we got maximum level of metallization as 71% with pre-oxidized magnetite. And it's not really as high as we compare to the goethite hematite one. So looking at the future work, we wanted to understand how the silicates, behavior of silicates particularly, affects the level of metallization, and also processing magnetite ores, and then the understanding of fundamental kinetics and scalability. So I know that we have the project I will be running soon, that's in approval process, that will be looking into those aspects, and we will be studying rigorous study to understand how these things play out at the end. In Calyx side of thing, I know they are moving into demonstration plans of 30,000 ton per year DRI, and there is the one I was talking about, the Hill CRC project will start on Calyx, and there is also a de-risking electric smelter is ongoing. And this is my group, the people who do the work and make it successful. So at Swinburne side, we had lots of PhD students. So we are very grateful to Hill that they have facilitated this project, which helped really like people to rise and get their knowledge. Myself, like speaking that I have personally benefited and grown quite a lot with this project. And at Calyx side, we are grateful to Matt, Yoon, Tom, Salwan, and University of Adelaide, we have Gus, Babak, and Alfonso, who has done incredible work to make it successful. Thank you to you all, and thank you.
Right, thank you very much, Dr. Sabah. I've got to say it's an impressive amount of work, very clearly communicated, but it really belies a huge amount of work that's gone on in a very short amount of time. So hats off to Calyx for driving that initiative. All right, so it's time for a coffee break. I would like to acknowledge the barista sponsor, Hatch. A round of applause for Hatch for sponsoring this coffee break, please. So thanks for your attention. We'll see you back here in about 20 minutes at 10:40. There's 3 more presentations and a panel discussion. Thank you.